Hello, everyone. Let's all stand and pray together. We thought you could get away with sitting down. Not to be. So tonight's program is about us being the change. So let's pray in that way. I'll say a sentence and then please repeat it. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father, Divine Mother,
great masters of our path,
great masters of our path,
great masters of all paths,
great masters of all paths,
we humbly bow to you all.
we humbly bow to you all.
O Lord,
O Lord,
you are omnipresent.
you are omnipresent.
You reside in the hearts
You reside in the hearts
of everyone on earth,
of everyone on earth,
of everything on earth.
of everything on earth.
We ask that your light,
We ask that your light,
your love and joy
your love and joy
be awakened
be awakened
in all things
in all things
and all people.
and all people.
And we ask the blessing
And we ask the blessing
that process
that process
start with us,
start with us,
and that each of us
and that each of us
can be an agent of change,
can be an agent of change,
a positive force
a positive force
to draw this world together
to draw this world together
in a new era
in a new era
of love and harmony.
of love and harmony.
Om. Peace.
Peace.
Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated.
I've lived in many countries and mixed with many men. I've shared their days of sunshine, gone with them in the rain. The fires at evening said we were brothers. The fires at evening said we were brothers. A soldier I saw weeping beside a dying friend. My officers had said I must hate him till the end. But seeing his grief I knew we were brothers. But seeing his grief I knew we were brothers.
A man sat on a doorstep to see the children play. The gentle way he smiled there would charm your fears away. A stranger he, but love made us brothers. A stranger he, but love made us brothers.
One day I climbed a mountain with friends of other lands.
The words we used were different, but joy one understands. Our gladness in God's world made us brothers. Our gladness in God's world made us brothers. The words and customs vary like waves upon the sea. One life beneath the surface binds everyone to me. Who knows the truth knows all men as brothers. Who knows the truth knows all men as brothers. Then brothers, why endeavor to set ourselves apart? The fences we've been building squeeze tight upon our hearts. Come sing the truth that all men are brothers. Come sing the truth that all men are brothers.
Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle, people climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Life is a dream, time like a stream, carries our burdens away. Never despair, joys everywhere, love can befriend you today. Free from all care, like birds on the air, soar above griefs and worries, seek joy and be gay. Often on earth, things of great worth, worldly ambitions defy. Sometimes a friend helps us ascend, love from life's cares to the sky. Love is a star, though shining afar, it can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh. Love is a star, though shining afar, it can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh.
Good evening, friends. Welcome. My name is Narya, and this is my wife, Dharma Devi. It's a great joy and privilege to share this Yogananda Fest with you and to share our panel of speakers. As a way of introduction, before we begin, I'd like to share a meditation technique, a secret meditation technique that has been recently discovered. It's called the cell phone yama. And there's 2 stages, and you can decide. The beginner level is to silence your phone. The advanced is to turn off your phone. But I warn you, if you turn your phone off, you may have certain convulsions. But don't worry, it's part of the technique. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Swami Sri Yukteswar, who was Yogananda's guru, said that the man of self-realization is a cause in the world. The deeper the self-realization of a man, he said, the less affected by the phenomenal flux. And that's exactly what our panel of speakers are going to share with us this evening. We have this large picture of Yogananda here. And make no mistake, it's not idol worship that we place this large image of the master. It's the ideal that he represented. And that ideal is self-realization, that each and every one of us have the capacity, the potential, the divine birthright and holy mission to take up this sacred journey to come back home to our oneness in God. I'd like to begin by introducing our panel by just telling you a brief story. In Autobiography, Yogananda starts and says that the characteristic features of Indian culture have long been the search for ultimate verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. And it's really this sacred bond of divine friendship. And that was the story of Swami Kriyananda. When he read the autobiography of a yogi, he was moved. And he read that in New York City, took virtually the next bus across the country here to Los Angeles, and met Yogananda in 1948. And from there, Nayaswami Jyotish and Devi and many others met Swami Kriyananda. But it's this story of divine friendship. And one of Yogananda's missions that he wanted to share and impart to the world was the unity of all religions. He said, we're all the bypass of all different religions. They all come together into this one common highway of self-realization. And our first speaker this evening on your far right, Reverend Gwen Gabord, she's the president and founder of the Gabord Center. This is an incredible organization that she has created after over 2 decades of working with many faith leaders across the country. And Yogananda talked about his Hollywood temple was a church of all religions. That's exactly what Gwen has created through the Gabord Center. And whenever I'm in her presence, I always feel a strength of heart and a courage. Gwen is determined to be the change in the world. And I'm honored that you're here with us this evening, Gwen. And I wanted to share from Whispers from Eternity, the dedication, because it really exemplifies Gwen and the Gabord Center. Yogananda made this his dedication. He said, dedicated unto all soul temples of Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Hebrews, Hindus, and others, wherein the cosmic heart throbs equally always. And unto thy multicolored lamps of all true teachings, in which shines the same one white flame of God. And unto all churches, mosques, viharas, tabernacles, and temples of the world, wherein our one Father dwells impartially, in the fullness of his glory. This represents Gwen and her work at the Gabord Center, and it's a great honor and privilege that she's here with us this evening to share on Be the Change. Thank you, Gwen. Next, this book, Whispers from Eternity, Yogananda called his book, these were prayer demands. And I was trying to think of the essential way to introduce Right Reverend Brian Kandib from the Aetherius Society, and that is, he is a prayer demander. His work at the Aetherius Society, the King Yoga that they practice, is designed as prayer demands to help balance world karma and help be the change in this world. Brian is the executive director of the Aetherius Society. He worked for over 20 years with the great George King and has dedicated his life to, again, being the change and ushering in positive energy and divine will healing through healing prayers and meditation and right spiritual living. So it's a great honor as well, Brian, that you're here this evening to share with us. And in relation to being a prayer demander, every year the Aetherius Society sponsors a world peace pilgrimage to Mount Baldy. And it's something that we've participated in, and many faith groups go up to the top of that mountain and pray. And it's a very powerful experience, and we'd invite you to join Brian and us the next time that happens. Next on our panel is Philip Goldberg. Dare I say, this book that Phil just wrote, The Life of Yogananda, is his magnum opus. I didn't know Phil all that well before I read this book. And when I read this book about Yogananda, I felt like he is one of my closest friends because he brought me closer to my guru. This book is incredible. I just finished it the other night. We have it on the table over there. I can't recommend it highly enough. when you think of Yogananda, and it exemplified the hero's journey, and I think that is really reflective in Phil's life, in bucking the trend, and finding his dharma, what the divine, how he wanted to play through him and sing through him. And this is really singing storytelling, superbly written and so engaging that you really feel the struggles that Yogananda faced as a human being. Because a great master, he still has a human level to his being and reality. And Phil so captures that story in such a way that it captures your heart. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, and I learned by reading Phil's book that Yogananda actually stopped in Arden, Delaware, right around the corner where I grew up, and I used to deliver produce there. So I know that the master's hand was in on my tomatoes. Thank you, Phil. Next, Nayaswami's Jyotishan Devi. You know, it's a challenge for me to introduce these two great souls. I would ask you a question. Do you know, who knows a celebrity? Someone in the room must have known some. Okay, I see a few people. Well, I don't know any celebrities, but I know two integrities, and they are Jyotishan Devi. They are dynamic emissaries for Paramahansa Yogananda. They're the spiritual directors of Ananda Sangha. They travel around the world and share the creedless teachings of Yogananda and his spiritual magnetism, his love and bliss. They're parents, grandparents, authors, friends, guides to many souls. But in their heart of hearts, they're humble disciples of a great master and lovers of God. And it's our great joy that you've joined us, that you've come down to southern Los Angeles to share with us. Thank you, Jyotishan Devi. So I'd like to invite Gwen to share with us, and we'll share.
Well, first I wish to offer a word of gratitude to Narayan and Dharma Devi for inviting me to be with all of you this evening for Yogananda Fest. You will note that I am solidarity with Ananda. Yogananda has always held a very special place in my heart, and so I am both humbled and delighted to be here speaking with all of you tonight, and I thank you. I want to begin my time with you by sharing a story, and every word of it is true. Many, many, many years ago, I had a little 4-year-old theologian that lived next door to me. And she had a habit of showing up anywhere in my home. My kitchen, my living room, my den, my bedroom, not the bathroom. And one Sunday afternoon, I was working out in the garden in my backyard. And there's something so special about having your hands in the soil when the earth is moist and there's that wonderful smell that comes up and you're again aware of the great gifts that we have been given. So all of a sudden, Alex showed up. She was all dressed up in her Sunday finest. And she stood watching me work in my garden for a while, and pretty soon she announced, with disdain, "I've been to Sunday school and church." And I said, "Well, Alex, what did you learn in Sunday school today?" And she said, "I learned that God is omnipotent." I couldn't believe that a 4-year-old could pronounce the word, and I was really curious as to what she thought it meant. So I said, "Well, Alex, what does that mean?" And she started to reply, and then she stopped, and she started again, and stopped, and after a long moment of looking down at me with great exasperation, she shrugged and she said, "It's much too complicated. You would never understand." 4 years old. Doctorate of theology. You know, it kind of made me feel a little small. Well, in some ways, Alex was right. It is complicated. We live in a world that is both invasive and disruptive. And we find ourselves in a historical moment of universal tension where the new norm has become the fracturing of communities through misinformation, character assassination, and increasing hostility to anyone who doesn't look, act, talk, or worship as I do. The theme for tonight is to be the change. It sometimes is hard to be the change in a world such as ours that seems so overwhelming and complicated. But on another level, my little friend Alex was wrong. As we all know, there is another level, the level that Yogananda and all the great prophets and teachers have called us to, which is not really complicated at all. I'm now into the 4th month of a 7th year, and I have had the wonderful opportunity to gather together a number of my colleagues in the greater LA area from many faith and religious traditions and teachings to begin a new cutting-edge interfaith organization called the Gibord Center, Religion Inside Out. Our mission is to bring people together to challenge assumptions, unleash the holy, and affirm the faith that transforms the world. We have become an oasis of truth-telling and a repository of light in the swirling vortex of denigration and darkness that tries to obscure and complicate the simple truth. At its heart, every religion and faith tradition is rooted in the truth that God is love, and the way to love God is to love one another. I think the greatest commandment that Jesus gave us was to love one another as I have loved you. It is that simple, and it's also that difficult. Just a word about the Gibord Center. Everything that we do, we now have over 80 programs that we've done in our 6 years and 7 months. Every program that we do is filmed, edited, and put up on the website. And we know by checking the website that people are logging in and seeing the many offerings that we've had from all over the world. I'm very pleased that everything that we offer is at no cost. And now in this year, we are live streaming. And the importance is that I want people everywhere to find out about Ananda, to find out about Buddhism and Hinduism and Baha'i faith and the Brahma Kumaras and Sikhs and Jains, the Jewish community, etc., etc. Tonight, in this sacred time together, we are all charged to become agents of change. All of us here gathered have the capacity, every one of you, to be an agent of change. This is the moment of challenge and possibility. It is a time for each of us to dig deeply, to tap into our better selves, to carry forward in our actions and our speech, to each be a loving, compassionate, forgiving, reconciling people. How do we do that? We do it in part by choosing kindness, and the power of choosing kindness is daunting. Yogananda said it, kindness is the light that dissolves all walls between souls, families, and nations. That's easy enough to say, but often terribly hard to do when we are caught in the disruptiveness and invasiveness of the world. One of the programs that the Gibord Center has done is talking about rituals and symbols. And I'm often asked, what does the clerical collar mean? And for us, it means that you are yoked to the teachings of Christ. If you ever see me going like that, it's to remind myself I'm yoked to the teachings of Christ. Because sometimes you're involved with a person where extra grace is required. Again, Yogananda said, to love those that love you is easy. To love those that love you not is not so simple. If you want to change anyone, set a better example. Show more kindness, more understanding, more love. So how do we manage to do such a thing? The whole purpose of prayer, meditation, inner work, ritual, is to anchor ourselves in the light, or in what Yogananda called the joyous after effects of meditation. If you retain the joyous after effects of meditation throughout the day, he continued to say, or part of the day, you will see that this joy will correctly guide you in everything. Retain the acquired joy of meditation throughout the day. The French philosopher and theologian Teilhard de Chardin put it a little differently when he said, joy is the most infallible sign of the presence of God. And with your laughter about the story of little Alex, the presence of God is amidst us this evening. The practice of yoga, meditation, prayer, ritual brings us the joy that sustains us for the hard work of keeping it simple. I want to share one more story, two more stories actually. There was a 14-year-old kid from a good family who was caught up in the upheaval of the culture that surrounds us. And this young man became a member of the neo-Nazi movement. The movement gave him an identity, purpose, and power. And he rose quickly through the ranks, and in just a few years landed in a position of power where he was out recruiting youth while enthusiastically brutalizing people of color and anyone those deemed deviant. There are two things that change his life, and they're simple things. The first was simple eye contact. He looked into the eyes of a black man he was beating, and he was stunned to see a real person looking back at him, not in anger or even in fear, but in the willingness to be present. No matter what he did, he could not get that look out of his mind. And the second thing that finally broke the hardness of his heart was in his own words, the people who were kind to me, who had no reason on earth to be. Another short story, I'm almost done. An indigenous elder said to his grandson, in every human there live two wolves, the wolf of hatred and the wolf of love, locked in battle. And the little boy asked him, grandfather, which one will win? And he said in reply, whichever you feed. That was not planned, and I don't think that's a wolf, but that's great. So in closing, I want to say, if you too, in your daily life, want to be an agent of change, always choose to be kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gwen. And that was the wolf of love over there. I'd like to invite Brian up to share with us.
Love is in the house. The wolf in sheep's clothing has arrived.
Hard to follow that. Well, good evening. Thank you very much, Marion and Dr. Davies, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you all. My tradition, the Aetherius Society, our founder, President Dr. King, he had great respect and love for Yogananda. So much so that it's a good story. One of the two members who joined the Aetherius Society back in the early 60s, they saw Dr. King holding up the autobiography of the yogi, and they went to Yogananda first, eventually kind of shared and moved over to the Aetherius Society to do work, but he was a very big proponent of Yogananda, and most of our members have read the autobiography. It's a wonderful book. It's also a pleasure to be here on this panel talking about being the change, because I think all of us here, if not millions of people around the world, know that the world is in dire need of change. And I firmly believe that the way to that change is through people on a spiritual path. Certainly towards the change that we want, shall we say, is through people on a spiritual path. And so I do have to say, I feel a little bit like I'm preaching to the choir here, because everyone here is pretty much on a spiritual path, following an excellent guru, Yogananda. So I commend you and thank you for that. It isn't always easy to be on a spiritual path, as I mentioned in these days. I'll try and give a little bit of different thought, if I could, to this panel and this evening, because our belief in the Aetherius Society expands spirituality beyond earth, and we believe that the great masters, Master Jesus, the Lord Buddha, Sri Krishna, they came from other planets in our belief, from very evolved spiritual civilizations that have come down here to help us in our time of need centuries ago. And if you look around the world today, we are certainly in dire need today. And we believe that, again, they are offering their help where they are able to. And it's a tremendous message of the importance of spirituality. And I want to start by reading an extract from a transmission, a receiving teaching from one of these great masters from Venus, called the Master Aetherius. And he spoke through our founder, Dr. King, on the BBC back in the late 50s. So imagine a black and white movie set, a TV set on the BBC in London, England, in the late 50s, black and white, a few people sitting in chairs, and there's this great message that's being given in those days in England. So I'd like to just read an extract from that. And the master is called the Master Aetherius. So the questioner goes like this. Questioner, when you come here, what is your purpose? Aetherius, at the moment, Earth, as you call it, faces a certain situation. The situation can be described as rather a dangerous one. You are liable to upset the balance of your Earth through, number one, atomic experimentation, and number two, your deviation from the spiritual laws. Questioner, are your visits designed to warn us against this? Aetherius, yes. Questioner, is there one single message that you would like to give us this evening? I'm afraid it must be brief. You'll understand that. You can imagine, you're telling this great being from the world, you gotta keep it short because we got a time limit here. But no, it's TV, it's TV. The answer, yes. I would like to say this. If you are a Christian, then live the laws as laid down by Jesus. If you are a Buddhist, live the laws as laid down by Buddha. If you are a Hindu, then be the best Hindu you can. This procedure is the one true way for men of earth to save themselves from their lower aspects. And it's a lovely, lovely message, but it tells us that our spirituality isn't just for us. I think we know that. It's not for us, for our friends, for our relatives. It's for the world. It's necessary for us to really work hard on our spiritual work and see it not as something that we can fit in behind our work and our other duties, but make that the focal point, that the most important thing, and let the other things fit around that. There's another quote I'd like to talk about from another being. This is from Mars Sector 6, strange name. But listen to the message that he tells us. This is from the 9 Freedoms. Serve in the great spiritual battle, and you can walk with head high and stand in any hall unafraid to read what be written there. The greatest yoga is service. The greatest religion is service. The greatest act is that act done in service. Serve and you'll become enlightened. Serve and you'll be practicing the true selfless love. Serve and the mighty power of Kundalini will rise in natural, unforced fashion and open the chakra jewels in your higher selves. Isn't that a beautiful statement? Service really is what is necessary in these days. And of course, we must do our spiritual practices so that we can effectively serve. But the goal and the focus is service, helping those who need help. And there are so many, as we know, who need help. I'd also like to read a short quote, and this is from a master of yoga, not a space being, a master of yoga, named Swami Satyananda. And he was one of the chief disciples of Swami Shivananda. And once he became enlightened and had risen the Kundalini to his highest chakras, he was told by Swami Shivananda to leave and form his own group, his own following. And he did that. And he formed Bihar Yoga, the school of Bihar Yoga. It's mainly in the East, but there are some pockets out here, and there's some wonderful books. But he passed away some years ago. But for the new millennium, in January 2000, he gave what I consider to be a very interesting talk to his followers in India. I'd like to read an extract of that. Satyananda. Now, yoga is taking another step forward. It is expanding beyond the personal, selfish, and narrow confines of individual practice, teachings, and ideals to encompass a broad spectrum of devotion, dedication, and integral participation in human emancipation. This is the interesting part, I find. This is not my order. It has been decided by forces which are beyond me. There will be no other way to evolve through yoga. All will eventually have to pull down their separate fences and signboards and begin to work together in one united, consecutive effort to uplift and free humanity from all forms of deprivation and degradation. Another wonderful message. And it really just illustrates how important it is to not only do our practices in whatever path we are on, but to find ways to come together with other paths. And that's why I'm so happy to be at this panel here. Because that really is the way for our future. That's the way to make the change that we know has to happen. And I'm very happy for all of you to be here, because I think you see that. And thank you for mentioning the World Peace Pilgrimage. This will be our 10th anniversary. In August, I think it's August 26th or 25th, I think it is, 25th, you. And so you're all invited to come and send out love and light and prayers for the world. I'm not that demanding, but prayers are so needed. Another thing that we do that I think I'll bring up is a thing called Operation Prayer Power. And that is also, was designed by Dr. King to be an interfaith tool to help the world. And we get together weekly to several places around the world, but to invoke spiritual energy through holy mantra. So we have a team of mantra people who are just invoking this powerful energy. And then we have people going up to the battery, a radionic device made of certain types of crystal that will hold the energy once it is invoked using certain prayers. And this energy is collected over the weeks and months, and it's stored and potentized by becoming more and more dense. And then when occasions are needed, we release it in a very potentized manner. For example, in about 30 minutes, we'll release 500 prayer hours, which takes us about 5 or 6 weeks to invoke that. So it's very potentized power. And we've done this recently on Wednesday, actually, for the Korean peace talks. And so we do this kind of thing throughout the year, either after an earthquake or before a hurricane or for a ceasefire, that kind of a thing. So if you'd like to help us, you can come to Hollywood, or if there's sufficient interest, I'd be more than happy to bring down one of our radionic devices at some place at some time. And I could grab some of your prayer energy and put it in the battery, and then we can release it at an appropriate time. So thank you again for having me, and for being so attentive, and for coming. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'd like to invite Phil to share with us.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for having me here tonight. I want to thank Narayan for the very kind review. I want to see it on Amazon. To me, the blueprint for the theme we're talking about tonight is well established in the Bhagavad Gita. Back many, many years ago, even before I read Autobiography of a Yogi, when I read the Bhagavad Gita and was studying it, there was one verse that stood out that's kind of always served me as a formula for how to live and how to be the change that we want to see. And it's chapter 2, verse 48. The Sanskrit of part of it is Yogastha Kuru Karmani. And the translation that I favor is established in yoga, perform action. That says it all. It's that one phrase. What does it mean? It means, this is, mind you, for those who don't know the context of the Gita, this is Lord Krishna speaking as the voice of the divine to Arjuna, the warrior who is kind of paralyzed about what to do. And that is the sort of kernel of his advice. First, establish yourself in yoga. Be a yogi. Do your yoga. Do your sadhana. Do your spiritual practice. Do that first. It always reminded me of Jesus' injunction to seek ye first the kingdom of God, and then all things will be added. There's an order of priorities. Establish in yoga. And by that, it doesn't just mean do your yoga, do your practice, whatever tradition you're in, but establish yourself in the state of yoga. Yoga is not just something you do, it's a state of being. That's how it's defined in the Yoga Sutras. It's a state of consciousness. It means unity. So establish yourself in that unity, in that state of consciousness that is beyond thought and beyond emotion and beyond awareness of ego and body. Achieve the union of the self, the small self, and the universal, capital S self, that is all of us and everything. That's the state of yoga. Establish yourself in that. And the whole Gita is a treatise on how to do that, and the different forms of yoga, and the many paths of yoga. But it's very clear he's not saying, be a yogi, establish yourself in yoga, and stay in your cave. It's established in yoga, perform action. What kind of action? Action in accord with Dharma. Dharma in the sense of svadharma, your personal dharma, that which is true and authentic and right for you and your spiritual path, that which will uphold your yoga, your evolution, your union with the divine. But also your dharma in all the roles you play in life. In Arjuna's case, as a warrior, as one whose duty was to protect his people from evil, defend them, and to uphold righteousness. So your duty as whatever your role in life is, and your role as a member of a family, and your role as a member of a community, and your role as a citizen of a locality, of a country, of the planet. These are different expressions of dharma, and means to do that which is of the highest good, that serves the highest values of evolution in all those spheres. That may mean being engaged in the world that you want to see change. Back in the late 60s, I went through a transition from being a radical political activist trying to end the Vietnam War and uphold civil rights, but feeling horrible inside and confused and whacked out, and turning to a spiritual life, and then becoming a spiritual activist and thinking all the other stuff was Maya. It was illusory. It was to be renounced. It was to be avoided because of this war, too disruptive and too disturbing of my inner peace. And so I became a spiritual activist. I was going to change the world one mantra at a time, as I used to say, by teaching people to meditate. And we thought that was the way everything would change, by changing people from within. And that was a big advance over trying to change political systems and all the rest, because change does come from within. But it wasn't quite enough. And here it was 40 some odd years later, and a lot of us old 60s freaks who turned into spiritual activists realized maybe some action is required, not just hope that it will happen automatically from within. And in that context, yoga stock, Kuru Karmani. Don't first be a yogi and then do your duty as a citizen. And in that context, when I was researching my biography of Yogananda, one of the great discoveries I made was coming to appreciate through examining the things he wrote in his magazine, the things he said in his speeches. He was not a disengaged yogi. He knew this was all play of Leela, of God, that it's all images on a movie screen, and that we should turn to the light of the projector and recognize that, that there's a certain unreality to this reality. But it doesn't mean detach yourself from it. Doesn't mean renounce it as illusion. It doesn't mean treat it as if it was meaningless. He was engaged. Not only engaged in the fulfillment of his mission, for which he worked incredibly hard, but engaged in the world. It was very refreshing for me to see he spoke out. He had a platform, and he used it. He was very aware of the conditions of the world. He was very aware of what was going on, and he did not hold back from commenting on it. During the boom of the 20s that led to the Great Depression, he spoke out about greed and avarice. During the Depression, he spoke out about the mistreatment of the poor and the destitute. During the build-up to the war, World War II, he spoke up in defense of freedom. He spoke out on behalf of the American war effort against fascism during the war. He was a staunch proponent of Indian independence movement and Gandhi's work. And he did all this without losing sight of the main thing, which was to teach people to be yogis, establish everybody in yoga. But he also spoke out at considerable risk, because he could have been deported as a subversive at any moment. And this I found inspiring. Too many people on a spiritual path feel to be removed from the craziness of the world, of politics and upheaval and violence and all the issues that occupy the daily news. But sometimes speaking out is consistent with being a yogi, consistent with being a truly deep spiritual person, not necessarily inconsistent. And the world needs engaged yogis and engaged people who are established in higher consciousness and are moving toward higher consciousness so they can see clearly and behave wisely and with compassion and a good heart at the same time. Let that sink in, I hope, and may that inspire you to do some good in the world. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dave.
I want to begin by adding my testimony to what Narayan said about the wonderful book that Phil has written. I've been a disciple of Yogananda for my entire life, and that book, the first true biography of Yogananda, has opened up real vistas and real knowledge that I didn't know, and you can see the totality of Yogananda's life and the arc, and as Phil so eloquently talked about, Yogananda came to help change the world, to help uplift this planet, and he didn't hold back in that mission. But as Phil said, he did it in a balanced way, he taught hundreds of thousands of people how to meditate, and that was an important part of that mission, but he also taught people how to live. His path was a balance between meditation and service. And those two, he said, have to become combined if there's going to be change, either individually or in terms of the planet. I doubt that there's anyone sitting here that feels that everything is just fine. There isn't any change needed in the world. We don't need to do anything about it. C.S. Lewis, the author of the Narnia Tales and so on, said that there are many, many people who want to serve God. Most of them in an advisory role. And so, if you want to be an advisor to God, or an advisor to the government, or an advisor to somebody outside of your own self, that isn't the kind of change that is going to bring about very much movement in the world. You know, the Be the Change campaign comes from a statement of Gandhi who said we must become the change that we want to see in the world. And so we have to begin with ourselves. There's a charming story of a woman who brings her young son to Gandhi and says, "My young son has been eating too much sugar. Tell him to not eat so much sugar." And Gandhi said, "Come back next week." And so next week the woman comes back and Gandhi says to her son, "You shouldn't eat so much sugar." And the woman says, "Well, why didn't you say that last week? Why did I have to go away, come back?" Gandhi said, "Last week I myself was eating too much sugar." And so if you want to tell somebody else what's wrong with their behavior, or what's wrong with their politics, or what's wrong with the way that they're separating the world and disrupting the world, you'd better stop eating that sugar before you try to make that statement. Because if you don't, there will be, as Yogananda said, your words will be like paper bullets shot out of a toy gun. There'll be no power, there'll be no authenticity behind what you're trying to do. So I think we're all joined together in the sense that this world needs changing, this world needs uplifting. And that change has to start with each one of ourselves working on ourselves. But it has to, as Phil said, it has to combine not just an inward directing change, but also combining that with an outward direction in terms of kindness, in terms of compassion. Yogananda gave us a very, very important principle. He talked a lot about energy and magnetism and how thoughts have energy and our beings have magnetism. There's a whole body of teachings that he gave about that. But one very important point is that he said we do not, that like attracts like. That's a magnetic law. So if we want to have a change toward more unity, more love, more compassion, then we have to express that ourselves. You can't go out to someone who is disruptive and disunifying and shout at them that they're doing wrong. You have to neutralize them with love and compassion. You have to neutralize, you know the great prayer of St. Francis that most people know, where there is hatred, let me sow love, where there is, and so on. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. When they traced that back to its roots, the Catholic Church, they found out that it probably was not written by St. Francis. It was first known from the breviary of William the Conqueror, which was a former incarnation of Yogananda. And so that principle that has gone through, that where you see something that needs change, then if you're trying to change a negative, you don't change the negative by adding more negation to it. You change it by neutralizing, by projecting or helping project the opposite quality. So where there's hatred, which there is in this world today, we cannot change that by hating the hatred or hating the haters. We have to change that by projecting more love, more compassion, more joy. Many of you probably heard of the musical system for teaching children music, the Suzuki method. That comes from a Japanese teacher of music, Dr. Suzuki. After the Second World War, there were many orphans that were in Japan. And so this very, very refined family. Dr. Suzuki was a doctorate of music and a professor, and his wife was very refined, and they had 1 or 2 children, very refined household. They took into their household an orphan, and the orphan was not very refined. And after a few weeks, the wife came to Mr. Suzuki, and she said, "I can't stand it anymore. This boy has disrupted our routine, disrupted our house. He's poorly behaved. He doesn't seem to want to change." And Dr. Suzuki said, "Yes, you're correct. We have to do something about it. We have to become more refined ourselves." Isn't that a beautiful image for what all of us need to do in the world today? That which we want to change, we have to begin to express. That which we want to see in the world, we have to begin to express. And I think that this time that we're living in is custom made for us to do that. You know, if you have a little sniffle, a little cold, you feel a little fluish, or you don't have much energy, you kind of live with it, right? You don't do much about it. But if you get really sick, if it's maybe life-threatening, then the time comes where you cognize, I better do something about this. A change is needed, and I can't just let the status quo go. I have to change my diet, I have to change my exercise, I have to get rid of the stress, whatever it is that we need to do. I think that this time that we're living in has moved from sniffles to a life-threatening disease. And that provides each and every one of us with a real golden opportunity, because the world will not change and improve in a spontaneous way. It will change and improve by individuals changing themselves and then collectively working together. Davy and I just returned from India, and we're working on a project there. There is a very high-level land developer in India who's built neighborhoods and malls and so on. And he recently went through a kind of a religious conversion, and he wants to dedicate his remaining years and a large amount of funds to helping uplift society, because he's done everything. He's accomplished everything that he ever set out to do on a material plane. But he realizes he hasn't dedicated himself to the upliftment of society. And he cognized that the thing that really needs to change is that we can try to change individuals, but it's better if we can help change the leaders. Because if we can change a leader, then that leader has influence over tens of hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of people. So the leverage is there of changing, by changing the leader. But he didn't really know how to go about that, so we were invited in to help vision an institute, a world-class institute, that will help to uplift the consciousness of those who are coming, and then teach the combination of skills of leadership. But if you uplift consciousness, just as Phil was saying, first you become a yogi, or first you move at least toward the consciousness of unity, the consciousness of an uplifted being. And then that becomes applied to whatever you do. It becomes applied to leadership. It becomes applied to instruction of children, whatever realm you're involved in. But the consciousness upliftment has to precede any real change. So we're working on the consciousness upliftment part of this dilemma, and we will continue to work on that. But it's the combination, as Phil was saying also, that it cannot be just done in a vacuum. It's not the time for yogis to retreat to the caves. It's time for the yogis to uplift and spread that light, because as a song of Swami Kriyananda's goes, you cannot drive out the darkness with a stick. You can only drive out darkness with the light. But there's great hope for the world today, because we've been pushed far enough so that we know the time cannot be delayed for when we take action. And that action has to start with ourselves, and then spread to the world that we actually inhabit. That means it has to spread. If you want harmony in the world, if you want peace in the world, create peace in yourself, peace in your family, peace in your business, those people that you actually connect with, spread in ever-widening circles, and you'll, by that peaceful energy, that light, will have the effect of a virus that will inhabit or infect other people and make them want to be kind, make them want to be inclusive, make them want to care about other people, to serve other people, to give love and joy to other people. But that all has to start within yourself, because without it, we will only have toy guns and paper bullets, and there will be no real change. So I invite all of us to join together and take on a personal sense of responsibility for the upliftment of the world, which starts with ourselves but doesn't end there. It has to spread out to all of those that we connect with. And let's be agents of light. And as Yogananda, we call him Master, he had the beautiful phrase, "Make me a smile millionaire." So let's be smile millionaires together.
Thank you, Jyotish. Davey will share.
First of all, I want to thank all my friends on the panel. I was so inspired that with each of you, and it's an honor to be a part of a troubled world with people like you. It gives one hope. And also I want to thank all of you for coming. And it's an honor to be with people who are asking the question, how can things get better? And this is the hope. Now, up till now, you've heard many inspiring thoughts and words and stories. I love the story of little Alex. It's much too complicated. But now I want to ask you all to do some work. Your time. So I'm going to ask you some questions. And I want you to do a little introspection and answer them inwardly. Because if we're talking about becoming the change, be the change, we have to start from where we are right now, don't we? I'll start with a little joke. When there was a story of a farmer in Maine, and a man, a tourist, was lost, and he was driving around, and he saw this farmer, and he said, "How do you get to such and such a town?" And the farmer thought, he said, "Well, you go right down this road, and then you take the first right turn." No, that won't work. No, you take the first left, and then go straight. No, that won't work. You know, you can't get there from here. And if we want to be the change, we have to start from where we are. Because we can't get there from somebody else's seat or somebody else's stance. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, how would you define yourself right now? And I don't mean outwardly. I don't mean I'm a lawyer or a banker or I deliver the mail, but who you are, your basic character. How would you define yourself right now? Think about it. And now I want to ask you the question, how do other people define you? Because we often can't see ourselves really well. But if you get a lot of feedback like, oh, you're always so bossy, and you think, me? I'm bossy. But if everybody else is telling you that, maybe that's part of who you are. So how do other people define you? And then kind of put those two together in a package, and then ask yourself the question, third question, who do I want to be? Where am I going? Who do I want to be? Starting from where I am right now, being honest. Who do I want to be? And then the question that we'll talk about together is, how do we get there from here? How do you get to who you want to be from who you are right now? And there are many wonderful things we can do. But it starts, first of all, with intention. Who you want to be. And the next step is making the choices. So if you want to be a kinder person and leave the neo-Nazis, then you have to make a choice in your life. We have intention, and then choice is acting on the intention. But how do we follow through with that intention? Willpower and determination. I can be different. One of the great movements in our country, and it's a deeply spiritual movement, is the 12-step process program. And that's for people who are saying, I know who I am. My name is John, I'm an alcoholic, but I know who I want to be. And then I'm going to keep moving with my intention and choices and willpower. And no matter how many times you fall down, you get up again. Because you hold in the light who you want to be. It's very important, and that's why the 12-step program is so effective. Environment. To be with people who believe in who you want to be, and you believe in who they want to be. And I remember once when I first was getting on the spiritual path and I became a vegetarian, and going back to visit some cousins of mine, and they were mocking me. Oh, ho, ho, we remember when you ate a whole T-bone steak. Well, yeah, I wasn't a vegetarian then. But does that mean I can't change? No, and I did change, and I never ate another T-bone steak. But environment is very important, to be with people that believe in change, whose minds are open and supportive. And then to enlist the aid of a higher power, to feel you are part of a greater reality. Jyotish and I and many others in this room were very fortunate to have the guidance and teaching of Swami Kriyananda, a direct disciple of Yogananda. And he would walk into a room, even when we were brand new on the path, and he would say, with firm conviction, good morning, all you great souls. And at first we would turn around to see who he was talking to. But then we realized he was talking to us. And to change, we have to have people who believe that we can change and believe that we are part of a higher power, that we can draw on that energy to change. It isn't just by our little efforts alone. In fact, it's really not at all by our little efforts alone. It's by the grace that we draw from our intention and choice and determination and good environment that draws that grace that we can say, I can do this. I don't have to be that person anymore. I can be who I want to be. And once I feel that change, then I can give somebody else a hand up and say, you can be that change too. You can make those changes. It can be done. And then I love that. One of my favorite scenes in all of cinema is the scene from the movie Gandhi, where he's taking the walk to the sea to get the salt to break the British. They were taxing the salt so that people couldn't afford it. So Gandhi said, the sea is filled with salt. So he started the march to the sea. And first you see Gandhi and a few little followers, and then the camera pans back and back and back, and there's tens and dozens and hundreds and thousands. And the British no longer are in India, but it's one man walking with intention and choice and willpower and drawing on a higher power, and with people around him who believed. And they changed not only India, but they changed the world. So many people are influenced by what Gandhi did. Martin Luther King, not the least of them. He spent time in India with Gandhi and learned and studied from him. But in these times in which we live, we need to understand, and I was so struck by one story of the two wolves, that the wolf of hatred and the wolf of love, which are within each one of us. And who wins? The one you feed. I had a similar experience to that. We were leading a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. There were 30 or so of us. And we went to a place called Megiddo, and it's in the desert. And they say it's the site of 7 different civilizations that have risen and fallen, and you stand on the ruins and you just feel this timelessness, but you also feel something else. You're in the desert. And as we stood there and we were holding hands and we were chanting Om for world peace, the military jets from the 2 warring factions were flying very low over the desert. And as we chanted Om, these jets were passing over us and over us. And in that moment as we chanted Om, I felt these 2 great forces, as though one might say angels. Angels of peace and harmony, and the angel of destruction and death. Giant beings, as Brian was talking about. I don't know that they were from another planet, but they were consciousness. Beings of higher consciousness, one of light and one of dark. And they were like, you know how you do leg wrestling where 2 people are staying and one's trying to throw the other off balance? They were trying to throw the other off balance, but they were equally matched. And they were locked in that eternal struggle. But when we chanted Om with sincerity and intention for peace, do you know what happened? The angel of light was strengthened. We feel that, oh, these beings can influence our planet, and it's true. But we too influence the beings of light that are the guardians of light or darkness in our world. And so don't think, well, you know, maybe some of these other people can do it. Maybe those people up on the stage, they seem to know what they're talking about. Don't let us fool you. Every one of us has to have that intention in our heart. And that will be the tipping point where that angel of light will triumph over the angel of darkness. We have a friend a great soul in India, who prays often to one of our line of avatars, Babaji. And she was praying to him and she was saying, Babaji, why are you allowing so much darkness in the world now? And the answer she received was, My role is not to diminish the darkness. My role is to strengthen the light. And that's what I can do. And that's what we can do. And so with all my heart, I ask you, as you leave here tonight, don't say, oh, that was a good talk that those people gave. I bought one of their books. That's not enough. It's not nearly enough. You need to go home and make a choice, have an intention, put out the willpower, and ask for the grace that you can change and that you can be a force of light in this world. And together we can join this wonderful army of light that will wash aside all the walls that people of little minds want to build, all the divisions that people of different political persuasions want to foster in the world today. This is just a passing moment in time, but the eternal truth, and we can be a part of that, is God's love for every one of his children and the unity that we are all children of the same Father, Mother, God. And so take it deeply. Ask how you want to change. Begin making that change. And ultimately become a channel of light in the world. And we join hands with you and we pray that each one of you can find the way to become what you came into this world to be. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Davey, Jyotish, Phil, Brian, and Gwen, for sharing.